Because I think the case for Davante is an easy one. The case for Davante Adams is it's worth it for both sides. The Packers have a nice core of wide receivers, but they lack one thing in particular: a true number one, a true security blanket, a Mr. Reliable, if you will. Championship teams have that. They just do. You want to run through the list? Philly has A.J. Brown. Kansas City has had Travis Kelce. Tampa Bay and New England had Rob Gronkowski. It is incredibly rare for a Super Bowl winning team to not have a true go-to guy. And while Romeo Doubs has kind of served that role for Jordan Love, he's been injured, he's been up and down, he's been inconsistent. Romeo Doubs isn't a true number one. He's a good receiver. He's a nice piece. Jaden Reed has had flashes where you go, holy smokes, is that dude talented? And is he going to be something great in this league at some point? And I still believe he will be. But he's not yet a true number one. Christian Watson, of anybody on this team, has looked the part the most. His vertical ability, contested catches. He's done a lot of really nice things. But guess what? You're not going to have Christian Watson for, if not more, or if not at least, half the season. Because he tore his ACL in the regular season finale on January 6th. Or January 5th, whatever that Sunday was. Christian Watson's a really good piece. He's a really good wide receiver. But you're just not going to have him this year. And Dontavian Wicks, while he has the talent, hasn't taken that next step. I think it would be a really bad idea for the Green Bay Packers to go into next season with the trio of Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, and Dontavian Wicks and just call that good enough. For a team that views their championship window as open, it would be malpractice to just trot those guys out there and say, that's good enough. What Davante Adams offers you is probably a short-term stay, 1 or 2 years, to bridge that gap and help continue the development while serving as that top guy. Davante Adams still got some ball game left in those legs. He's still a really good receiver. So I think Davante can come in, be that top guy for a few years, while Jaden Reed continues to ascend and Dontavian Wicks continues to mature and cut down on those drops for both of those guys. As Christian Watson gets healthy and maybe returns to what he had been and then continues that growth. It just makes a ton of sense for both sides. Davante Adams wants to chase a title and add to his legacy. Green Bay is one of, what would you say, 9, 10, 11, 12 teams that have a legitimate shot to win the Super Bowl next year. Adding a guy like Davante Adams increases the effectiveness of that offense. It helps Jordan Love. It helps the receivers around him. Helps the tight ends. He's one of the best in the league. And he's not going to have to get paid like a Jamar Chase or like a T. Higgins will on the open market. He'll be expensive, and rightfully so. But for the first time in a long time, this is a type of player that the Packers can afford and would be better for paying. They'd be better for it. It just makes a ton of sense in my mind for both sides here. For Davante Adams to come back to Green Bay and reunite with the Packers and quarterback Jordan Love. It just seems like it makes too much sense. And that is why I think it ultimately happens.
Now, I thank you, Isaac, on the ESPN Milwaukee YouTube chat for this, because this was not something I had thought of, but I think it makes a lot of sense. He brings up the idea of Davante Adams going to the Chiefs, especially since I happened to watch the New Heights podcast a little bit this morning with my wife, and Travis Kelce sounding like he's going to retire. And if he does, that opens up about $17 million of their cap space for the team. If I'm Davante Adams, as great as it might be to go back to Green Bay, I'd rather go and play with Patrick Mahomes. And that could turn this into a bidding war that I don't think Goody is willing to get into, because I think the Chiefs might make a huge push to get Davante Adams and could throw in a huge wrench in this.
Yeah, so Hollywood Brown is a free agent this offseason. That will also affect their ability, right? Because he's it's not like he's crazy expensive, but That would affect, their investment level at that wide receiver position. Rashee Rice will come back healthy next year. And, of course, Xavier Worthy's there. I think Adams wants to be the top dog. I don't know if you walk into a room with Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, and Rashee Rice, two wide receivers, those last two, who were on the ascension, at least prior to Rashee Rice's injury early on in the season. I don't know if that's the best scenario for Adams and what he wants. But, yeah, I think it's a good point by Isaac. But I think it is certainly a team that could be a dark horse in landing Davante Adams. I agree.
I just think there's also a level of, if he wants to try and go and get that ring, he walks into that receiving room and it's Rice, Worthy, and Davante Adams. That becomes the best receiver room outside of, Philly? And if T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are there, like in Cincinnati, like it's those three are your conversation for best receiver room. Like that, I think Kansas City might be where he ends up. I hate to tell you that, Strouf. I know we just did the percentage game, but I think he ends up in KC. I think that's a very real thing.
It's a very interesting thought, and one, admittedly, I have not thought of yet. I've really only thought of the teams that it was leaked he'd be interested in joining, but you'd be a fool to say, Patrick Mahomes wants me to come play with him? Nah, I'm good. Right? You'd be a fool to view it that way. So it is a really interesting thought. Now, I think, is it possible Davante's on the open market? Absolutely. And I think that might probably change the odds for him ending up in Green Bay. I think there's a very real possibility this ends in a trade, though, and Green Bay would make more sense. At least, look, I think the Jets realize they're not contending for a Super Bowl next year, but they'd like to kick him to the other conference, I think. But maybe I'm wrong. We will see.